Hello, health champions. Today we're going to talk about the top 10 foods that cause dementia. And we also need to understand some of the mechanisms that drive the progression of dementia so that we can understand what the foods have to do with it. And dementia progresses very, very rapidly with age. So that between 60 and 65 years of age, we have about 1.3% dementia. Between 65 and 70, we have about 2.2%. Between 70 and 75, it rises to 3.8%. Between 75 and 80, it goes up to 6.5%. 5 years later, it's up to 11.6%. And by the time we're 90, over 20% of the population have dementia. And then after 90, more than 40% of the population have dementia. So as you can see, it progresses very, very rapidly. And we need to understand what the causes are and how the foods are influencing that so that we can slow down this progression. So there are some things that the brain needs that helps the brain stay functional. And the first thing is energy. Because the brain is only 2% of your body weight, but it uses over 20% of all your energy. So on average, it's 10% more metabolically active, more needing energy than your body cells on average. And the way the brain makes energy, of course, is from fuel, which is carbohydrates and ketones. And in order to oxidize that fuel, it needs oxygen. And most of this energy is created inside your cells in little inclusions, little things called mitochondria. They make the vast majority of all your energy. And one more thing that the brain needs that is absolutely essential that virtually no one ever talks about because they're just talking about how it makes energy, but it also needs stimulation because without stimulation, it's use it or lose it, just like a muscle. If you put your muscle in a cast, if you break your arm, put a cast, then after 2 weeks, you have lost 50% of that muscle. That's the half-life of protein. And the brain is the same way. So when we're not stimulating, when we're not driving signals to the brain on a regular basis, then the brain starts degenerating and deteriorating. And that's one of the mechanisms contributing to dementia. And then there are the factors that damage, that hurt your brain, that speed up the progression of degeneration. And one, of course, is poor genetics, but we need to understand what that means because most people think that the DNA is set, it's fixed, which in one sense it is, and another one it isn't. So when we talk about your genome, that's your setup, your makeup of DNA, that's half the chromosomes from your mom and half the chromosomes from your dad. They combine and they become your genome. There's nothing you can do about that. That is what you're born with. However, what most people don't realize is that is just like the foundation. That really is not all that important because there's also epigenetics, which means on top of genetics. And that is how you express it. So you can have genes that are never turned on. You can have bad genes that are latent, that are never activated. You can have good genes that you express well or that you express poorly. And like I mentioned, disuse is very, very harmful. We need to understand that exercise is not about losing weight or staying fit or looking good. It's about stimulating your brain. And then we come to the inflammation part of it, which is the biggest biochemical driver of degeneration, which is chronic low-grade inflammation. And there's several components to that. One is oxidative stress, which we have to have some oxidative stress because that's how we make energy. When those mitochondria make energy, they use oxygen, we create oxidative stress. But the cleaner things burn, the more balanced things are. And if we get a lot of junk in the body, then those mitochondria, they tend to rust a little bit. They don't burn as clean. It's like a little engine that starts smoking. And now we get excess oxidative stress and we get less energy out of it. And there are also environmental toxins, and those are both the pollution as well as all the things that we add to food, like preservatives and artificial colors, etc. Then there is food allergies, because if you have a sensitivity to a food, if it causes a reaction, that's an inflammatory reaction. So that contributes more to that inflammation. And then there is dysbiosis, that we're only recently starting to understand how important that is, because if you have an imbalance of bacteria in your gut, if you don't have enough of the good ones, or you have too many of the pathogenic ones, now you start getting a little war zone. You start getting chaos down in your gut, and that creates inflammation, but it also creates damage to the lining and to the mucus layer. So now we get leaky gut and we increase the amount of food allergies. So you can see how all of these things are kind of tied together, that they depend on each other. And when one thing isn't working, it makes the whole worse.